I was on a secure call with legal when my phone buzzed. My sister's text said not to come to Easter because my job was too embarrassing. I replied that I understood. Then a restricted number flashed. The voice said they were from the Wall Street Journal and needed to run my story immediately. I laughed at my sister's text. She had no idea my embarrassing job was about to become the headline that destroyed her holiday dinner. My name is Harper Wynne, and if you asked my family to describe me in one word, they would probably choose aimless. I am 34 years old. I live in an apartment in Jersey City that my mother constantly refers to as transitional, and I drive a sedan that is 5 years old. I do not post pictures of my latte art on Instagram. I do not check in on Facebook when I go to the airport. To the Wynne family, silence is synonymous with failure. If you are not broadcasting your success, it must mean you have nothing to broadcast. I was standing in my office when the vibration of my phone cut through the low hum of the air conditioning. It was a single notification, sitting innocuously on the lock screen, but I knew the sender before I even looked. It was Brooke. My sister is 3 years older than me and has spent every single one of those years trying to curate our family's image as if we were a mid-tier reality television show fighting for renewal. The message was not a question, it was a directive. Don't come to Easter. Your job is too embarrassing. I stared at the words. The screen brightness was turned down low, a habit I had picked up from years of working in low-light war rooms, but the text seemed to sear into my retinas. Most people would have felt a spike of adrenaline, a flush of heat rising up the neck, or the stinging prick of tears. I felt none of those things. I felt the cold, familiar wash of confirmation. This was the natural conclusion to a narrative Brooke had been writing about me since I was 22. She followed up immediately with a second text, because Brooke never trusted a single bullet point to do the job when a paragraph of justification could make her feel more righteous. Mom and Dad agree. Graham is going to be there. He is a serious person. Harper, he is successful. The extended family is coming down from upstate, and we really need the day to be perfect. We can't have everyone asking you what you do and you giving those vague answers about paperwork. It kills the vibe. It makes us look low rent. Just tell them you are sick or working a shift. Working a shift, that was how they saw it. To them. I was eternally working a shift, likely at a warehouse or a call center, scraping by on hourly wages and poor decisions. They assumed my lack of detail was a shield for mediocrity. They never considered that detail was a privilege they did not have the security clearance to access. I typed a response. My thumbs moved with the muscle memory of someone who drafts legal disclaimers for a living. I did not defend myself. I did not ask for a chance to prove Graham wrong. I did not point out that I had paid off my student loans 6 years ago while Brooke was still refinancing her credit card debt. Understood. I wrote, I will stay away. I set the phone down on the mahogany conference table. The surface was cool and polished to a mirror shine. It reflected the ceiling lights, distorting them into long, white streaks. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling glass wall that looked out over the Hudson River. From here, the Manhattan skyline looked like a jagged set of teeth biting into the gray sky. My family called me stubborn. That was the label they slapped on me when I turned down a safe, mid-level marketing job straight out of college to intern at a firm they had never heard of. They called me unsafe when I moved to Jersey City, instead of the suburbs where Brooke was busy buying a house she could barely afford to impress neighbors she did not like. They called me a dreamer when I told them I wanted to work in compliance. Compliance. The word itself sounded boring to them. It sounded like checking boxes and filing tax returns. They heard compliance and thought of the person at the DMV who tells you that you filled out the wrong form. They did not understand that at my level. Compliance was not about following rules. It was about enforcing them upon people who thought they were gods. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I was wearing a charcoal gray sweater and black slacks, no jewelry, no designer logos visible. My hair was pulled back in a severe clip. To Brooke, this was the uniform of someone who had given up. She liked bright colors, loud patterns, and logos that screamed the price tag at anyone within a 10-foot radius. She measured worth by visibility. Brooke mentioned Graham. I knew Graham, not personally. Of course, I had never shaken his hand, but I knew Graham Kessler. My sister had been dating him for 6 months, and in that time, she had mentioned his job title approximately 400 times. He was a strategic manager at a mid-sized pharmaceutical firm. To my parents, that sounded impressive. It had the words strategy and pharmaceutical in it. It sounded like money. It sounded like stability. It sounded like the kind of son-in-law they could brag about at the country club they were fighting to stay members of. I turned back to my desk. My office was silent. It was a silence I had paid for with years of 70-hour weeks and ulcers I treated with peppermint tea and sheer willpower. The name of the company on the frosted glass door behind me was Ridgewell Compliance Group. It was a name that meant absolutely nothing to the general public. We did not advertise. We did not have a Twitter account. We did not sponsor charity 5K runs. If you knew the name Ridgewell, it was usually because you were in deep trouble or you were trying to avoid it. We were the cleaners. We were the investigators sent in by boards of directors when the numbers did not add up, or by federal regulators when a whistleblower leaked a hard drive. We were the people who walked into a room, locked the doors, and did not leave until we knew exactly who had stolen what and how they planned to hide it. I sat down in my chair, the leather creaking softly. The irony of Brooke's text was not lost on me. She was worried I would embarrass her in front of a man who made perhaps $200,000 a year, while I was currently sitting on a dossier that could wipe out $1 billion in market capitalization before the opening bell on Monday. The wound of their rejection was old, but it still ached when the weather changed. It was a dull throb in the center of my chest. It wasn't just that they didn't know what I did. It was that they didn't want to know. They preferred their version of me. The version of Harper who was the family failure made them feel safer. It gave Brooke someone to look down on, which made her view from the middle feel like a view from the top. It gave my parents a problem to discuss in hushed tones, uniting them in their shared disappointment. I was the designated cautionary tale. Don't be like Harper. She was so smart in high school. What a waste. She just wouldn't listen to advice. I picked up a pen and tapped it against the edge of the desk. Don't come to Easter. I had spent nearly a decade minimizing myself to fit into their narrative. I wore older clothes when I visited. I never talked about my travel. I nodded when my dad gave me advice on how to save $50 on car insurance. I played the role because I loved them, and because I thought that eventually, if I was humble enough, they would stop trying to fix me and just love me back. But the text made it clear. They didn't want me. They wanted the absence of me. My presence was an imperfection in their scenic picture. I swiveled my chair toward the dual monitors on my desk. On the right screen was a complex flowchart mapping the shell companies of a conglomerate suspected of massive environmental fraud. On the left screen was my calendar. I looked at the date. Today was Wednesday. Easter Sunday was 4 days away. My eyes drifted down the calendar entries. Meetings with legal counsel, deposition review, final strategy session, and then, there it was, a block of time on Easter Sunday itself. It was not a work meeting, it was a trigger date. Months ago, I had set a timer on a specific investigation. It was a case involving a mid-sized pharmaceutical company that had been cutting corners on safety trials to rush a new drug to market. The investigation had been grueling. We had been stonewalled, threatened, and hacked. But we had found the smoking gun. We had the internal emails, the falsified lab reports, and the recorded Zoom calls where the executives laughed about the risks. The regulatory bodies had given the company a deadline to self-report and capitulate before the findings were made public. That deadline expired at midnight on Saturday. If they did not come clean, the story would break on Sunday morning. I frowned, leaning closer to the screen. I knew the name of the company. Of course, I had been living inside their dirty laundry for 8 months, but I had never paid much attention to the lower-level executive roster. My focus was on the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, the people whose signatures were on the fraudulent filings. But Brooke had said Graham worked for a pharmaceutical firm. She had said he was a strategic manager. I minimized the flowchart and opened the personnel file for the target company. I typed in the name Graham. The search bar spun for a fraction of a second. Graham Kessler, Senior Director of Strategic Alignment. I stopped breathing for a moment. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Graham Kessler, Brooks Graham, the man who was too successful to be seen at a dinner table with me, the man whose presence was the reason I was being banned from my own family's holiday. He wasn't the mastermind of the fraud. He was too low on the totem pole for that. But his name was copied on 3 of the most damning email chains in our evidence folder. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a yes man. He was the guy who nodded when the boss said to bury the data. He was the guy who forwarded the falsified reports to the marketing team. I leaned back in my chair, a strange sound escaping my throat. It was half laugh, half gasp. My sister was banning me from Easter because she wanted to show off her boyfriend's success. She wanted to protect the family image from the stain of my failure. And she had absolutely no idea that the embarrassing job she despised was the only thing standing between her boyfriend and a federal indictment. She didn't know that the woman she just uninvited was the lead investigator on the case that was about to turn Graham's life into a crater. I looked at the calendar again. Easter Sunday. The Mok Kung Bo, the publication milestone. The Wall Street Journal was the outlet we had partnered with for the exclusive. They had the story ready to go. They were just waiting for my final green light, specifically confirming that the company had missed the midnight deadline. I picked up my phone again. I looked at Brooks' message. Don't come. A slow, cold resolve settled in my stomach. It was heavier than anger. It was the weight of leverage. I had spent years being the punchline of the Wynn family joke. I had sat in the corner and let them talk over me. I had let them rewrite my life story to make themselves feel better. But this time, the pen was in my hand. I did not reply to Brooke again. I simply placed the phone face down. The city outside was gray and hard, just like the reality I lived in. They wanted me to be invisible? Fine, I would be invisible. But they were about to learn that the things you can't see are usually the things that hit you the hardest. I reached for my mouse and opened the file labeled Project Lazarus. It was the code name for Graham's company investigation. The time for being the little sister was over. If they wanted to play games with reputation, I would show them how the professionals did it. The silence in my office felt different now. It wasn't lonely. It was the deep, pressurized silence of a storm front moving in. I was ready to work, to the outside world, and specifically to the Wynn family. Ridgewell Compliance Group sounds like the kind of place where dreams go to die under a mountain of manila folders. It sounds like fluorescent lights, stale coffee, and people whose primary ambition is to leave the office at exactly 5 o'clock. That is by design. My business partner, Elias, and I spent 3 weeks debating the name when we incorporated 7 years ago. We wanted something beige. We wanted something that would slide off the brain like water off a duck. When you are investigating the internal corruption of Fortune 500 companies, you do not want a name that screams danger. You want to look like the accountants. The reality of my workday bears zero resemblance to the administrative drudgery my sister imagines. I am not an assistant. I am not a mid-level manager. I am a co-founder and the majority shareholder of a firm that bills its time at $800 an hour. Ridgewell does not handle routine tax audits. We are the firm that gets called when a board of directors receives an anonymous letter claiming the CEO is embezzling funds through a shell company in the Caymans. We are the people who come in when a tech giant realizes their head of engineering has been selling trade secrets to a competitor. We do not fix the leaks. We find the people holding the drill. I stood up and walked over to the sideboard to pour a glass of sparkling water. The office was quiet, insulated by triple-paned glass that turned the chaos of Jersey City into a silent movie. I looked at the singular piece of art on the wall, a stark, black-and-white photograph of a storm front moving over a prairie. It had cost me $12,000. Brooke would have hated it. She would have said it looked depressing and asked why I did not buy something with gold leaf or a pop of color to show people I had taste. My family's ignorance regarding my career is not entirely their fault. It is a carefully constructed architecture of omission that I built brick by brick. When I first started Ridgewell, I made the mistake of trying to explain the nuance of regulatory oversight to my mother. She had glazed over within 30 seconds and asked if that meant I was a paralegal. I realized then that correcting them was a trap. If I told them I owned the company, they would ask how much money I made. If I told them how much money I made, our relationship would fundamentally shift from dismissal to transactional expectation. I had seen it happen to a cousin who won a lottery scratch-off. Suddenly, he was not a person anymore. He was a walking ATM. So, I gave them the paperwork narrative. I just handle files. I would say at Thanksgiving, I check to make sure the forms are signed in the right places. It is very dry. You would be bored to tears. It was the perfect cover. It fed directly into their confirmation bias. To Brooke, it made perfect sense that her awkward, stubborn little sister ended up pushing paper in a back room somewhere. It allowed her to maintain her position as the successful one, the one who worked in communications and branding, industries she insisted were vibrant and essential. Brooke loved the word essential. She loved to talk about how her work shaped the cultural conversation. She did not know that my work often determined whether the companies she admired would exist in the next fiscal quarter. I sat back down at my desk and unlocked the secure drive. The fan on my laptop whirred to life. I remember the day I left the safety of the corporate path my parents had charted for me. I was 27. I had taken out a $50,000 loan against my own future, cashed out my 401k, and moved into a studio apartment that smelled permanently of boiled cabbage. I worked 18 hours a day for 2 years. I lost contact with friends. I missed weddings. I aged 5 years and 24 months. I did not do it because I wanted to be rich. I did it because I was tired of asking for permission. My parents had always operated their small hardware business with a heavy hand of anxiety. They counted every cent, which I respected, but they also counted every cent in everyone else's pocket, which I despised. When I was younger, if I bought a new pair of shoes, my father would ask the price before he said hello. If it was over $40, I got a lecture on fiscal responsibility. That scrutiny created a reflex in me. I learned to hide my wins. I learned that having nice things just invited an audit of my life choices. That is why I drive a sedan that blends into the pavement. That is why I wear clothes that have no visible labels but are tailored to fit me perfectly. It is stealth wealth. My sheets are Egyptian cotton. My skincare regimen costs more than my car payment, and my investment portfolio is diversified across 3 continents. But when I go home for Easter, I look like a woman who coupons. It is a defense mechanism. If they think I am struggling, they lecture me, which is annoying but manageable. If they knew I could buy Brooke's house in cash tomorrow morning, the dynamic would become toxic. They would feel entitled to my success. They would say, "We raised you to be this way," taking credit for the very ambition they tried to crush. Or worse, Brooke would feel threatened. And a threatened Brooke was a cruel Brooke. I pulled up the dossier for the pharmaceutical case. Graham's company, Project Lazarus. The file was massive. It contained terabytes of emails, Slack messages, and voice memos. The narrative we had constructed was damning. They had a drug that was causing liver failure in 3% of test subjects, and they had buried the data by reclassifying the subjects as non-compliant drops. Graham Kessler had signed off on the revised marketing timeline. He had sent an email that read, "We need to push the narrative that the delays are purely administrative. The science is solid." He knew. He might not have been the architect of the lie, but he was a willing bricklayer. I tapped my finger against the desk. This was the power of Ridgewell. We held the truth in a world that was addicted to spin. Right now, the board of that pharmaceutical company was in a panic room somewhere, probably screaming at their lawyers. They knew Ridgewell had the report. They knew we were the final arbiter. Our contract stated that if we found evidence of criminal negligence, we were legally obligated to report it to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Justice, regardless of the client's wishes. That was the clause that made us expensive. That was the clause that made us terrifying. We were not fixers. We were the executioners of bad business practices. I had the power to delay the report. I could claim we needed to verify one last data set. I could give them a week of breathing room to let their stock stabilize before the hit. I could release it on Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp, triggering a sell-off that would wipe out Graham's stock options and likely result in his immediate termination for cause. I was not holding this secret to be vindictive. I was not doing it to get back at Brooke for years of snide comments about my hair or my lack of a husband. I was doing it because this was the job. The detachment was the point. But the irony was suffocating. Brooke was out there right now, probably picking out a dress for Sunday, telling her friends that her boyfriend was a high flyer, warning me to stay away so I wouldn't taint the picture. She was polishing the brass on the Titanic while I was holding the iceberg. My intercom buzzed. It was Elias. Harper. His voice came through, crisp and low. We just got a call from the client's general counsel. They are offering to double the retainer if we delay the submission by 48 hours. They are claiming a technical glitch in their server migration. I press the talk button. Tell them no. The timeline stands. And tell them if they call again with a bribe disguised as a fee adjustment, I will add an obstruction addendum to the final report. Copy that, Elias said. I love it when you go nuclear. I released the button. This was who I was. This was the embarrassing work I did. I protected the market from frauds. I protected patients from bad medicine. I protected the concept of truth in an industry that treated it as a suggestion. I looked at my phone again. No new messages from Brooke. She probably thought she had won. She probably thought I was sitting in my transitional apartment, feeling ashamed of my station in life. She did not understand that I did not need her validation. I had something better. I had leverage. And unlike popularity, leverage does not fade when you leave the room. The Wall Street Journal journalist, a woman named Reynolds, had sent me a draft of the article earlier that morning. The headline was still tentative, but the content was explosive. It detailed how a boutique compliance firm, U.S., had uncovered one of the decade's largest pharmaceutical cover-ups. It mentioned me by name as the lead investigator. For years, I had kept my name out of the press. I liked the shadows, but this case was different. This case required a face. The victims needed to know someone had fought for them. I checked the time. It was 4 p.m. My calendar chimed, a reminder for a video call with the client's crisis management team, Graham's team. They were desperate for a meeting. They wanted to know what we had found. They wanted to know if they could survive. I wasn't going to take the meeting. I was going to let them sweat until Monday. But then I remembered the text, "Don't come to Easter." I reached for my mouse and opened the calendar invite. I declined the meeting with the crisis team. Instead, I sent a direct email to the primary contact listed on the compliance intake form. Mr. Kessler, I typed, I understand your team is anxious for an update regarding the compliance audit. I am not available for a full board presentation at this time. However, due to the sensitive nature of the findings, I am willing to have a brief, off-the-record conversation with the project lead to discuss the scope of the inevitable public disclosure. I hit send. I was not going to break confidentiality. I was not going to violate my ethics. But I was going to see just how successful Graham felt when he was sitting across from the woman his girlfriend called an embarrassment. The game had changed. They wanted me to be small? Fine. I would show them exactly how big a shadow I could cast. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked out of my glass office, ready to go home and eat instant noodles in my $1,000,000 silence. The vibration of my phone against the mahogany table sounded like a drill in the empty office. I stared at the screen. The caller ID did not display a name or a number. It simply read, "Restricted." In my line of work, a restricted number usually means one of two things. It is either a federal regulator calling from a secure line to tell you that you are about to be subpoenaed, or it is a whistleblower calling from a burner phone to tell you where the bodies are buried. Neither option is particularly relaxing at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. I picked it up. I did not say hello. I just waited. Silence is a powerful tool on a phone call. The person who speaks first is usually the one who loses leverage. Ms. Wynne? The voice was female, crisp, and possessed the kind of diction that costs $50,000 a year in private school tuition. This is Sarah Reynolds. I am a senior investigative reporter with the Wall Street Journal. My pulse did not jump. My training kicked in instantly. Deny, deflect, disconnect. I have no comment on any active client matters, I said, my thumb hovering over the red end call button. If you want a statement, you can contact the press office of whichever corporation you are currently investigating. I am hanging up now. Don't, Reynolds said. She spoke fast, cutting through my dismissal. I am not calling for a quote on a scandal. Harper, I am calling because I have the draft of a feature story on my desk. The headline is about the transparent restructuring of the Kessler-Vane pharmaceutical portfolio, and right now, the hero of that story is you. I froze. My thumb pulled back from the screen. In the world of high-stakes corporate compliance, we are not heroes. We are the grim reapers. We are the people companies hire when they have no other choice. If my name was in a draft at the Wall Street Journal, someone had broken the first rule of working with Ridgewell: anonymity. I do not give interviews, I said, my voice dropping an octave. And if you print my name in connection with a privileged audit, my legal team will have an injunction on your editor's desk before your morning coffee gets cold. We have sources. Harper, Reynolds said, her tone shifting from aggressive to conversational. Multiple sources inside the Kessler-Vane strategy team. They are telling us that without your intervention regarding the clinical trial data, the company would be facing a total collapse. They are framing this as a victory for ethical capitalism. They are saying you are the architect of the cleanup. I stood up and walked to the window. My mind was racing, connecting dots that I had previously kept in separate boxes. Kessler-Vane, that was the parent company of the subsidiary Graham worked for. It was the entity I had been investigating for 8 months. Why now? I asked. The audit is not closed. The findings are not public. Because the market smells blood, Reynolds replied. Stock is wobbling. The board needs a win. They need the street to know that they have brought in the heavy hitter to fix the mess. They are leaking your involvement to stabilize the share price. They are using your reputation as a shield. I let out a short, sharp breath. It was brilliant, in a desperate, sleazy way. The company was in trouble. They knew the report I was about to file would be devastating. So, they decided to get ahead of it. By leaking to the journal that they had hired me, the Iron Lady of Compliance, as one blog had once ridiculously called me, they were signaling to investors that they were taking the problem seriously. They were trying to spin their own negligence into a story of redemption. But then the second realization hit me, and it hit me harder than the business strategy. Reynolds had mentioned sources inside the strategy team. Graham Kessler was the senior director of strategic alignment. My sister's boyfriend, the man who was supposedly too successful to dine with me, the man Brooke claimed was a rising star. He wasn't just a bystander in this mess. He was likely one of the people leaking my name to save his own skin. The irony was so thick, I could almost taste it. Brooke had spent the last week telling me that I was an embarrassment to the family. She had uninvited me from Easter because she thought I would bring down the tone of her perfect gathering with my paperwork job. She thought Graham was the prize. She thought he was the gold standard. But in reality, Graham was sitting in a burning building and he was using my name, my embarrassing name, as the fire extinguisher. Harper, Reynolds said, are you still there? I am here, I said. What is your deadline? We want to run it online Friday morning, print edition Saturday. No, I said. It wasn't a request. If you run that story on Friday, you will spook the regulators. The SEC will view the leak as an attempt to manipulate stock value before the official filing. They will freeze the assets. The restructuring will fail. And the 3,000 employees you mentioned saving will be out on the street by Monday. There was silence on the other end. Reynolds was a pro. She knew I was right. When can we run it? She asked. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Easter Sunday was the 31st. The filing deadline was Saturday at midnight. Sunday, I said. You can run it Sunday morning, after the filing is locked in the federal database. That way, it is a report on a completed action, not speculation on an active investigation. That is a long hold, Reynolds said. I risk getting scooped. You won't get scooped, I assured her. Because I am the only one with the raw data, and I am the only one who can confirm the narrative. If you hold until Sunday, I will give you the exclusive interview. I will walk you through exactly how we found the discrepancies. I will give you the story of the decade. You want to go on the record? Reynolds sounded skeptical. You just said you don't give interviews. I changed my mind, I said. I think it is time people understood exactly what my job entails. I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. Sunday morning, done. I will send over a list of preliminary questions. Fine, I said. But Reynolds, one more thing. Do not contact anyone else at Kessler Vane. If I find out you called the strategy team for a quote before Sunday, the deal is off. Understood, she said. I will keep it tight. I was about to hang up when she spoke again. Her voice was different this time. Lighter. Almost friendly. By the way, she said, good luck with the family dinner. Easter can be stressful with big personalities. Try to enjoy the ham. The line went dead. I stood there, holding the phone, my knuckles turning white. Try to enjoy the ham. How did she know about the dinner? I hadn't mentioned Easter. I hadn't mentioned my family. The investigation had nothing to do with my personal life. A cold chill crawled up my spine. Journalists like Reynolds did their homework. If she was writing a profile on me, she would have dug into my background. She would have found my parents' names. She might have even found Brooke's social media. Brooke's Instagram was public. She posted everything. She had probably posted a story about hosting Easter dinner, tagging Graham, tagging my parents. It wouldn't take a genius to connect the dots. Reynolds knew Graham was a source. She knew I was the investigator. She knew we were connected. She knew. The Wall Street Journal knew that the lead investigator and the subject of the investigation were likely going to be sitting at the same table on Sunday. To a reporter, that wasn't just a business story. That was a color piece. That was the human interest angle that won awards. Sister uninvited. Boyfriend under siege. The collision course at the Easter table. I felt a sudden sharp laugh bubble up in my chest. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who realizes the gun has already been fired, and now we are just waiting to see where the bullet lands. Brooke thought she was controlling the narrative. She thought she had successfully exiled the black sheep to protect her image, but she had no idea that the spotlight she craved was about to swing in her direction, and it was going to be blinding. I looked at the phone again. Graham needed me. He needed the credibility of Ridgewell Compliance Group to wash his company clean. He was probably praying right now that I would sign off on the report without digging too deep into his specific department. He didn't know I was Harper. To him, the investigator was likely just a win on the email correspondence, a faceless bureaucrat, a gender-neutral signature block. He knew Brooke had a sister named Harper. But why would he connect the terrifying auditor dismantling his company with the loser sister who worked in paperwork? The cognitive dissonance was my best protection. Brooke had done such a good job convincing him I was a nobody that he couldn't see the predator standing right in front of him. I sat down and opened my laptop. I pulled up the draft of the final report. I had intended to be lenient. I had intended to recommend a standard probation period for the strategy team. But now I needed to be thorough. I needed to be absolutely, unimpeachably precise. If the Wall Street Journal was coming to dinner, I needed to make sure the main course was ready. I typed a quick email to my assistant. Prepare the full unredacted file on the strategy unit of Kessler Vane. Specifically, all communications involving Graham Kessler. I need hard copies. Delivered to my apartment by Saturday night. I hit send. The game had shifted. It wasn't just about saving a company anymore. It was about revealing the truth to the people who claimed to value it, only to realize they couldn't handle the weight of it. Brooke wanted a memorable Easter. I was going to give her one. I walked out of the office, the city lights below me beginning to flicker on. I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear of missing out on the family gathering was gone. I wasn't missing out. I was simply preparing my entrance. And unlike Brooke, who needed noise to be heard, I was going to make my statement without saying a word until it was absolutely necessary. The phone in my pocket buzzed one last time. A text from my mother. "We will miss you. Maybe you can pick up an extra shift and make some overtime?" I didn't reply. I just smiled. Overtime? No. I was about to get paid in a currency they didn't even know existed. Thursday morning arrived with the relentless persistence of a migraine. My phone had been vibrating intermittently since 6 in the morning, a rhythmic buzzing against the nightstand that I had eventually smothered under a pillow. When I finally sat up and retrieved the device, the screen was a wall of gray text bubbles. Brooke was awake, and Brooke was on a rampage. It was not enough that she had uninvited me. The initial banishment was simply the opening act. Now, she felt the need to draft the closing arguments to ensure the jury, me, understood exactly why I was guilty. I sat on the edge of my bed, feet touching the cold hardwood floor, and began to read. The messages were long, rambling paragraphs devoid of punctuation but heavy on judgment. "I just want you to understand that this is not personal." The first one read, "It is just that Graham is used to a certain caliber of people. He works with executives. He works with people who have summer homes in the Hamptons. It is going to be awkward if he asks you about your 5-year plan and you start talking about how you are finding yourself. I am protecting you. Harper, I am saving you from looking like a charity case." I scrolled down. "Do you remember Christmas 3 years ago? When you wore that sweater from the thrift store and argued with Uncle Ted about the economy? That is the energy we cannot have on Sunday. This is my future at stake. If Graham proposes, everything changes for this family. I can't have you ruining the aesthetic because you want to be stubborn." The sweater from the thrift store was actually a vintage cashmere piece I had bought at an estate auction in Paris, but I had never corrected her. Uncle Ted had been drunk and claiming that the minimum wage was too high. I had merely cited a Federal Reserve study. To Brooke, facts that contradicted her worldview were not facts. They were personal attacks. Then came the kicker. The message that made me set my coffee mug down very carefully because my hand had started to shake. "Also, Mom said we are doing a group gift for the hosts since the cousins are driving down. We are getting them a Traeger grill. Your share is $300. Please Venmo me by noon. It will look weird if your name isn't on the card. And I don't want to have to explain to everyone that you couldn't afford it. Just pay it so we can save face." I stared at the number. $300. She was kicking me out of the dinner, insulting my career, and erasing my presence. But she still expected me to subsidize her attempt to impress our extended family. It was breathtakingly audacious. It was the kind of maneuver that only someone who has never been told no could execute. In the past, the old Harper, the sister who wanted to keep the peace, would have sent the money. I would have swallowed the insult, typed sent, and spent the rest of the day feeling small and used. I would have convinced myself that buying my way onto a greeting card was a form of belonging. But that Harper didn't exist anymore. She had been replaced by the lead investigator of Ridgewell Compliance Group. I did not reply. Instead, I took a screenshot of the text. Then I took a screenshot of the previous text where she called me a charity case. I opened a secure folder on my cloud drive, the one I usually reserved for hostile witnesses and non-compliant executives. I created a new subfolder. Label, Family Dynamics, Extortion. I uploaded the images. I noted the timestamps. It was a reflex. In my world, you do not argue with a hostile party. You let them talk. You let them dig. You document every shovel of dirt they throw until they are standing in a hole so deep they can't climb out. I was just closing the app when the phone rang. The photo on the screen showed a smiling woman holding a garden trowel. My mother. I took a deep breath, composed my voice into a neutral, professional timbre, and answered. "Hello, Mom." Harper, her voice was soft, carrying that specific tone of weaponized fragility she had perfected over 3 decades. "I was just talking to Brooke. She is very upset." "Is she?" I asked. She seemed quite articulate in her texts. "Oh, honey, you know how she gets when she is stressed," my mother said, dismissing the verbal abuse as if it were a mild weather event. "She just wants everything to be perfect. This Graham fellow, He is a big deal. We all just want to make a good impression. You understand, don't you? I understand she asked me not to come, I said. And then she asked me for $300. There was a pause on the other end, a hesitation that told me my mother knew exactly what Brooke was doing, and she had signed off on it. Well, it is for the family. Harper, she said, her voice tightening slightly. We are all pitching in. It would look very bad if you didn't contribute. People talk. We don't want them asking why you are not involved. We want to protect you from that scrutiny. Protect me, I repeated flatly. Yes, we just need a little peace. Harper, your sister is finally happy. She is finally with someone who can take care of her. Can't you just swallow your pride for one weekend? Just send the money, stay home, and let her have her moment. You can come over next week for leftovers. It will be quieter then. More your speed. More your speed. The phrase hung in the air. It wasn't just Brooke. It was the entire system. My family functioned like a corporation with a toxic culture. Brooke was the volatile CEO. My parents were the enabling board of directors, and I was the scapegoat employed solely to absorb the liability. They needed me to be the failure. If I wasn't the mess, then Brooke wasn't the success. My inferiority was the foundation upon which they built their self-esteem. If I told them right now that I ran a multi-million-dollar firm, they wouldn't be proud. They would be angry. They would feel betrayed, as if I had stolen something from them. I would be breaking the contract of our relationship. I hear you, Mom, I said. My voice was ice cold, but she interpreted it as submission. I will handle it. Good girl, she said, the relief palpable. I knew you would be reasonable. We will miss you, of course, but this is for the best. I ended the call. I did not send the money. Instead, I opened my email and sent a confirmation to Sarah Reynolds at the Wall Street Journal. Subject: Production schedule. Sarah, regarding the B-roll footage you requested, I am clearing my schedule for Saturday night. You can bring the camera crew to my apartment at 7 in the evening. We will film the segment on the hidden life of compliance officers then. I want the backdrop to be my home office. It needs to look authentic. I wanted the contrast. I wanted the world to see the stark, minimalist discipline of my life on the very night my family was preparing for their bloated, performative feast, while Brooke was frantically arranging place settings and screaming about the ham. I would be on camera, calmly explaining how I dissect corporate fraud for a living. I went to the office an hour late. I took my time getting coffee. I walked into the Ridgewell lobby feeling a strange sense of liberation. The cords that had tethered me to their approval were snapping, one by one. When I reached my desk, Elias was already there. He was standing by the window, looking down at the street, his arms crossed. He turned when I walked in, his expression unreadable. You have a message, he said. It came through the priority channel. Regulators? I asked, putting my bag down. No, Elias said. The client, specifically, the strategy unit. I paused. Graham Kessler? Elias nodded. His executive assistant called 10 minutes ago. He is demanding an emergency meeting, today. I already told him I wasn't doing a board presentation, I said, booting up my computer. He can wait until the report is filed. He doesn't want a board presentation, Elias said, a small, dark smile touching the corners of his mouth. He was very specific. Harper. He asked for a private audience, off the record, no lawyers, no minutes. I stopped typing. Did he say why? He said he needs to discuss mitigating factors regarding his personal liability, Elias quoted. He sounded rattled. He asked for the lead investigator by name, well, by title. He asked for the person in charge of the audit. He doesn't know it's me, I said, half to myself. He has no idea. No, Elias said, and here is the kicker. He explicitly requested that the meeting be held at our office, not his. He wants to come here. He said he needs to get away from his own building because he thinks his internal comms are being monitored. I leaned back in my chair. Graham Kessler, the man my sister was terrified I would embarrass. was currently terrified of his own shadow. He was sneaking around behind his company's back, trying to cut a side deal to save his career. And he wanted to come to my turf to do it. And, Elias added, he emphasized that it must be confidential. He said, and I quote, "I cannot afford for this to get out to my family or my partners." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. He wants to keep secrets from his partner, I said. That sounds like Graham. What do you want to do? Elias asked. We can tell him to pound sand. It is highly irregular. No, I said, my eyes drifting to the calendar. Bring him in. When? 5 o'clock, I said. Send him the visitor pass. Tell him he will be meeting with the senior managing partner. Do not give him my name, just the title. He is going to walk in here expecting a 60-year-old man in a suit, Elias warned. I know, I said. He is going to be very surprised. I looked at the phone where Brooke's demand for $300 was still glowing on the screen. Brooke wanted me to pay to save face? Fine. I was about to collect a debt, but it wouldn't be in cash. It would be in the look on Graham Kessler's face when he realized that the woman holding the axe over his neck was the same woman he was too good to eat dinner with. Set the room up, I told Elias. And Elias, make sure the glass walls are clear. I want the lighting to be perfect. I turned back to my work. The trap was not just set. The mouse had just called and asked for directions to the cheese. At 5 o'clock sharp, the sun was beginning to dip behind the skyscrapers of Manhattan across the river, casting long, fiery streaks of orange light through the glass walls of Conference Room B. I stood outside the door for a moment, watching him. Graham Kessler was pacing. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a navy suit that likely cost more than my first car. He had the kind of polished, symmetrical handsomeness that usually guarantees a smooth ride through corporate America. But right now, that polish was cracking. He kept running a hand through his gelled hair, disrupting the perfect coif. He checked his watch 3 times in the span of 30 seconds. He was a man accustomed to being the most important person in the room, and the silence of my office was unnerving him. He was expecting a senior partner. He was expecting a gray-haired man named Elias, or perhaps a weary ex-prosecutor. He was expecting someone he could charm, or bribe, or at least reason with using the vernacular of the boys' club. He was not expecting the woman his girlfriend had described as a project. I nodded to Elias, who was standing guard at the door. He swiped his keycard, and the heavy glass door slid open with a soft, hydraulic hiss. Graham spun around, a practiced smile already plastering itself onto his face. Good evening, he started, his voice projecting confident warmth. I appreciate you seeing me on such short notice. I know... The words died in his throat. The smile faltered, then vanished entirely, replaced by a look of genuine, unadulterated confusion. He blinked, as if his brain were trying to reboot to process a visual error. Harper? He said my name like it was a question in a foreign language. I did not stop walking. I moved past him, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically against the polished concrete floor. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table, the seat of authority, and sat down. I placed the black folder I was carrying on the table, aligning it perfectly with the edge. Mr. Kessler, I said. My voice was level, stripped of any familial warmth. Please, take a seat. Graham did not move. He stared at me, his eyes darting from my face to the door, then back to me. He looked like he was waiting for the punchline. I don't understand, he stammered, a nervous laugh bubbling up. Harper, what are you doing here? Did Brooke send you? Is this a prank? I am waiting for the managing partner. You are looking at her, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy enough to crush lungs. Graham's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked at the logo etched into the glass wall behind me, Ridgewell Compliance Group, and then back at me. I could see the gears grinding in his head. He was trying to reconcile the narrative he had been fed with the reality in front of him. Brooke had told him I was a drifter. She had told him I did paperwork. She had told him I was an embarrassment who needed to borrow money for a grill. And yet, here I was, sitting in a corner office with a view of the skyline, wearing a tailored blazer, holding the file that contained the fate of his career. "You," he whispered. "You are Ridgewell?" "I am the co-founder and lead investigator," I corrected. "And right now, I am the person deciding whether your company survives the weekend. Sit down, Graham." He sat. He collapsed into the chair opposite me, his legs looking suddenly unsteady. The color had drained from his face, leaving him a pale, waxen gray. "Does Brooke know?" he asked. It was the first place his mind went. "That is irrelevant," I said, cutting him off. "We are not here to discuss my sister. We are not here to discuss Easter dinner. We are here to discuss the clinical trial data for the liver toxicity study in your Phase 3 launch." I opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a graph. I slid it across the table toward him. Graham looked down at the paper. His hands were resting on the table, and I saw his fingers twitch. "I know about the reclassification of the dropouts," I said. "I know that 14 patients were removed from the study data due to non-compliance when, in fact, they were removed because their liver enzyme levels spiked to 300% of the baseline." Graham flinched at the number. That was a judgment call," he said, his voice weak. The medical director felt the data was noisy. It wasn't malicious. "It was fraud," I said, "and it was signed off by the strategy unit, your unit." I watched him. This was the part of the job I was best at. I studied the micro-expressions, the dilation of the pupils, the way the pulse jumped in the carotid artery. Graham was terrified. He wasn't a villain. He was a coward. He had gone along to get along. And now he was realizing that the price of admission was his future. "I didn't generate the data," he pleaded, leaning forward. "Harper, listen, you know me. Well, you know of me. I am a good guy. I just manage the timelines. I don't touch the science. Your signature is on the release authorization," I pointed out. "I have the email chain. You pushed for the early release date to hit the quarterly earnings call. You specifically asked if the outliers could be minimized." He winced. "That is standard corporate language." "It is standard language for a cover-up," I said. "And the Securities and Exchange Commission has a very different dictionary than you do." He slumped back in his chair. He looked small. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that the air in the room felt thin. He was realizing that the embarrassing sister-in-law he had been avoiding was actually the judge, jury, and executioner of his life. "What do you want?" he asked hoarsely. "Are you going to ruin me? Is this because of Brooke? Because she uninvited you?" I looked at him with genuine pity. "You think I would jeopardize a multi-million-dollar investigation because my sister was rude to me? You are overestimating your importance in my personal life. Graham, this is business." I leaned forward, clasping my hands. "However," I said, "I am not interested in destroying a company if it can be saved. There are 3,000 employees at Kessler Vane who had nothing to do with this decision. I don't want them to lose their pensions because 5 executives wanted a bonus." Graham's head snapped up. Hope is a dangerous thing, and I saw it flare in his eyes. "We can fix it?" he asked. "I can fix it," I corrected. "I can frame the report as a self-correction. I can state that the internal audit, us, identified the error and the company voluntarily halted the launch to reevaluate the safety protocols. If we do that, the stock will dip, but it won't crash. You won't be delisted. You won't go to prison." "Okay," he breathed out, nodding rapidly. "Okay, yes, let's do that. Thank you. Harper, thank you. I owe you." "There is a condition," I said. He froze. "What condition?" "Transparency," I said. "Complete transparency. The revised report must identify exactly how the error happened. It cannot be blamed on a computer glitch. It cannot be blamed on noisy data. It must be identified as a failure of the internal communication protocol." I paused, letting the weight of the next sentence build. "And the person responsible for that protocol, The person who filtered the data between the lab and your desk must be terminated for cause. Graham swallowed hard. He knew who that was. I watched the realization dawn on him. The liaison, he murmured. Yes, I said. The external consultant you brought in to handle the messaging of the trial. The one who polished the reports before they got to you. The one who told you it was safe to sign. Graham looked down at his hands. He was sweating now. A bead of perspiration rolled down his temple. Harper, he said, his voice trembling. You know who that is? I know it is the person who signed the vendor contract, I said calmly. I don't care about their name. I care about their function. That role failed. That role created the liability. If you want to save the company, you have to cut the cancer out. He looked at me with pleading eyes. He was trapped. He knew that the person he had to fire was the same person he was planning to bring to Easter dinner. He knew that the consultant was the woman who was currently bragging about his success to our entire family. I can't, he whispered. It will blow up everything. Then the report goes out as is, I said, reaching for the folder. And Monday morning, the Department of Justice will be in your lobby seizing hard drives. I stood up. The meeting was over. I had given him the choice. Wait, he said, scrambling up from his chair. Wait, give me until Sunday, please. The filing deadline is Saturday night, I lied. I could hold it until Sunday morning, but he didn't need to know that. I need time to figure out how to do it, he said, looking desperate. Please, Harper, just for the family? For your parents? I looked at him. He was using my parents as a shield, just like Brooke did. I will give you until Sunday morning, I said slowly, but not for the family. I am giving you time because if the Wall Street Journal runs their story before we file the correction, there is no saving it. And Graham? He looked at me, eyes wide. They are running the story on Sunday, I said. Whether you are the hero who fixed the problem or the villain who caused it depends entirely on what you do in the next 48 hours. I gestured to the door. You can show yourself out. I have work to do. And Graham? I wouldn't mention this meeting to Brooke. She tends to overreact to bad news. He nodded, mute and terrified, and backed out of the room. I watched him go. I watched him walk through the glass doors, past the reception desk, and into the elevator. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. In a way, he had seen the ghost of the sister they thought they knew, and he had realized that she was the only thing real in his entire fake world. I sat back down and exhaled. My heart was beating a little faster than usual, but my hands were steady. I checked my phone. Another text from Brooke. Did you send the money yet? Seriously, Harper, don't be cheap. I smiled. I wasn't being cheap. I was just saving my capital for the final payment. The decision of whether to attend Easter dinner was not emotional for me. It was tactical. If I went, I would be walking into a trap set by my sister, designed to highlight my inadequacies against the backdrop of her manufactured perfection. I would be the prop in her play. If I stayed away entirely, I would be the coward, the black sheep who was too ashamed to show her face. I needed a third option. I needed to be present without being there. I needed to haunt the room. I sat in my living room on Saturday evening. The space was a study in intentional emptiness. The floors were polished concrete. The furniture was low, Italian, and uncomfortable for anyone who did not know how to sit with purpose. There were no family photos on the walls. There were no knickknacks collecting dust. Sarah Reynolds, the journalist from the Wall Street Journal, was sitting across from me. A cameraman was adjusting a light diffuser in the corner. They were getting the B-roll footage for the video component of the digital article. You live very quietly for someone who holds this much power, Sarah remarked, looking around the room. No trophies? No diplomas on the wall? Validation is a private asset, I said, looking directly into the camera lens. If you need to hang it on a wall for people to see, you probably don't own it. You are just renting the applause. The cameraman nodded, checking his focus. That is a great line, Sarah said. Can you say that again? But look at me this time? I repeated it, I wanted that soundbite to play. I wanted Brooke to hear it when she clicked on the link. I wanted her to realize that while she was busy buying $300 throw pillows to prove she had made it, I was building an empire that required zero decoration. Sarah checked her notes. So, the article goes live tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. We have the confirmation from your team that the regulatory filing is locked? It is locked, I confirmed. I sent the final encryption key an hour ago. The Securities and Exchange Commission has the data. Kessler Vane has been notified that the restructuring is mandatory. And Graham Kessler? She asked. Graham has been given a choice, I said. We will see what he does with it. After the crew left, the apartment felt even quieter. I walked to my laptop and opened the internal Ridgewell server. I initiated a Level 5 security protocol on the Kessler Vane files. This meant that no one, not even the client's own IT department, could access the documents until the public release. I was sealing the exits. If Graham tried to delete anything tonight, he would find his access revoked. If Brooke tried to snoop on his laptop, she would find a blank screen. I was controlling the flow of information down to the byte. My phone rang. It was Brooke. This was the first time she had called me since the "don't come" text. Usually, she preferred texting because it allowed her to monologue without interruption. Calling meant she was anxious. Calling meant she needed immediate feedback. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I put it on speaker and set it on the granite island in my kitchen while I made tea. Hello, Brooke? Harper, she said. Her voice was tight. It lacked the usual condescending lilt. It sounded brittle. Are you home? I am. Okay, good. Listen, I have a weird question. She paused, and I could hear the sound of aggressive chopping in the background. She was probably stress prepping vegetables for tomorrow. Graham is acting really strange. Strange how? I asked, dropping a tea bag into the water. He came home yesterday looking like he had seen a ghost. He went straight to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a scotch. It was 5:30 in the afternoon. He never drinks before 7. Maybe he had a hard day at the office, I suggested. He won't talk to me, Brooke continued, her voice rising in pitch. He just keeps pacing, and then, about an hour ago, he asked me about you. I smiled. Did he? Yes, he asked me, very specifically, what you do for a living. I told him the usual, that you do admin work or whatever, and he got angry. He snapped at me. He said, "Does she work for Ridgewell?" The chopping sound stopped. Harper, Brooke said, and now there was genuine fear in her voice. Why would Graham know the name of the company you work at? Did you stalk him? Did you try to contact him to ask for a job or something? Because if you did, if you embarrassed me by begging my boyfriend for employment— I did not ask him for a job, I said calmly. Then why does he know the name? She demanded. He kept asking if I knew your title. He asked if I knew your clearance level. What is he talking about? Do you answer the phones there? Are you the receptionist? I took a sip of tea. The warmth spread through my chest. I have keys to the building, I said. It was a truthful, vague statement. I handle the files. Brooke, I told you that. I handle the sensitive files. Oh my God, Brooke groaned. You messed something up, didn't you? You work in the file room and you lost something important, and now it is affecting his company. That is it, isn't it? You are a liability even from a distance. Is that what Graham said? He didn't say anything, she snapped. He just keeps staring at his phone and asking if I am sure you are just my sister. He is paranoid. You need to tell me exactly what your connection is so I can calm him down. I cannot have him stressed on Easter. He is supposed to meet Uncle Jerry. I cannot discuss client matters, I said. NDAs, very strict. I am your sister, she screamed. Screw the NDA, tell me what you did. I didn't do anything. Brooke, I am just doing my job. If Graham is stressed, perhaps you should ask him about his job. Maybe the stress is coming from his side of the fence. There was a silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. She was trying to figure out if I was mocking her or if I was simply too stupid to understand the gravity of the situation. "You are not coming tomorrow, right?" she asked suddenly. "You didn't change your mind?" "I am not coming," I assured her. "I respected your request. I will be spending the day alone." "Good," she said, but the relief wasn't there. "Good. Stay away. We don't need any weird energy. Just, if Graham asks you anything, if he texts you, just tell him you are a filing clerk, okay? Please, just be small. Harper, for once in your life, just be small. Be small." It was the family motto. Harper, be small so Brooke can feel big. "I understand," I said. "Have a lovely dinner, Brooke." I hung up. I stood there in my silent kitchen. The command to be small echoed in the room. It was the last time she would ever say that to me. I walked over to the counter where I had placed a large, thick envelope. It was cream-colored, heavy stock, sealed with a security strip. Inside was not a bomb, but it was explosive. It contained a single advance copy of the Wall Street Journal article, printed on high-quality paper. I had clipped a small, handwritten note to the front. The note was neutral. It was polite. It was the kind of note a professional sends to an acquaintance. "Brooke, since you were concerned about my career path, I thought you might like to see this. It clarifies the work I do. Happy Easter. Harper." I had already arranged for the courier. I did not use a standard delivery service. I used a private courier firm that specialized in legal documents and high-value assets. I had paid an extra $900 for a specific delivery window. I picked up my phone and dialed the courier dispatch. "This is Harper Wynne," I said when the dispatcher answered. "I am confirming the job for tomorrow morning, Sunday, 10 o'clock. "We have it on the board, Ms. Wynne," the dispatcher said. "Delivery to the residents in the suburbs. Hand delivery to Ms. Brooke Wynne. Do you want signature required?" "No signature," I said. "I want it delivered right as they are sitting down to eat. The instructions are to ring the doorbell, hand it to whoever opens the door, and say it is urgent correspondence for Brooke Wynne." "Understood. We will have a driver there at 10 sharp. Make sure he looks professional," I added. "Suit and tie. I want it to look official." "Our drivers always look professional, ma'am." I thanked him and ended the call. 10 o'clock. That was when they usually sat down for the main brunch course. The ham would be on the table. Graham would be on his third drink, sweating through his shirt. My parents would be making polite conversation about the neighbors. Brooke would be holding court, probably telling a story about how she managed the crisis of my absence. And then the doorbell would ring. It was the perfect Trojan horse. I wasn't crashing the party. I was sending a gift. I looked at the envelope one last time. It felt heavy in my hand. It was the weight of 10 years of silence. It was the weight of every time they had interrupted me, every time they had rolled their eyes, every time they had asked me when I was going to get a real job. I placed the envelope by the door. I wasn't going to Easter to beg for a seat at the table. I was flipping the table over. The plan was in motion. Graham had until tomorrow morning to fire Brooke to save his company. Brooke had until tomorrow morning to enjoy her delusion of superiority. And my parents had until tomorrow morning to believe that they had one successful daughter and one failure. By noon on Sunday, all of those beliefs would be inverted. I turned off the kitchen light. I was going to sleep well tonight. The truth does not need to shout. It just needs to be delivered on time. While I sat in the clinically silent serenity of my Jersey City apartment, sipping Earl Grey tea and watching the river move sluggishly toward the harbor, a very different scene was playing out 3 miles away in the suburbs. I did not need to be there to see it. I knew the script, I knew the set design, and I certainly knew the actors. The Wynne family. Easter brunch is less of a celebration and more of a competitive sport. It takes place in my parents' dining room, a space that is too small for the 20 people they cram into it, resulting in a humidity level generated entirely by body heat and desperation. The air always smells of over-sweetened glazed ham and expensive perfume applied too liberally to mask the scent of anxiety. My sister, Brooke, would have arrived 20 minutes late to ensure she had an entrance. I can picture it with absolute clarity. She would be wearing a pastel dress that she would later claim was a designer vintage find, though we all knew it was from a high-end outlet mall. But the most important accessory on her arm was not her purse. It was Graham. Graham Kessler walked into that house not as a guest, but as a prop to Brooke. He was human proof that she had won the game of life. She paraded him past the cousins, past the aunts who were already judging the appetizers, and straight to the head of the room where my father held court. "This is Graham," Brooke announced, her voice pitched to carry over the clatter of silverware. "I told you about his promotion. He is operating at a high strategic level now. The company literally cannot make a move without his team signing off." The irony of that statement likely made Graham want to vomit. I know this because, at that exact moment, Graham was not looking at my father with the pride of a rising executive. He was looking at his phone. He had been checking it every 30 seconds since he woke up. He was waiting for an email from me. He was waiting for the confirmation that I had accepted his surrender and that I wasn't going to let the Department of Justice turn his office into a crime scene on Monday morning. "Strategic level," Uncle Ted boomed, slapping Graham on the back hard enough to make him wince. "That sounds like where the money is. Good for you, son. We need more men with vision in this family." Graham forced a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. "It is a lot of responsibility," he mumbled, his eyes darting back to the black screen of his phone. "Lots of moving parts." "He is being modest," Brooke interjected, looping her arm through his and squeezing tight, anchoring him to her narrative. "They are restructuring the whole portfolio. Graham is basically steering the ship." It was around 10:15 when the inevitable question finally landed. It came from Aunt Linda, a woman whose primary form of affection was passive-aggressive interrogation. "Where is Harper?" Linda asked, scanning the room as if I might be hiding under the buffet table. "I thought she was coming this year. I wanted to ask her why she is still driving that old sedan." The room went quiet. This was the moment Brooke had prepared for. She let out a long, dramatic sigh, the kind that suggests she is carrying a burden too heavy for ordinary mortals to understand. "Harper couldn't make it," Brooke said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "She got called in for work. Again." "On Easter?" my mother asked, performing her role of the long-suffering matriarch. "That is a shame." "Well, you know how it is with those admin jobs," Brooke said, waving her hand dismissively. "It is all paperwork. Someone has to file the invoices and check the boxes. I told her she should just quit and find something with better work-life balance. But she is stubborn. She is probably sitting in a basement somewhere right now sorting tax forms." The table chuckled, a ripple of superior amusement. Poor Harper. Poor, aimless Harper with her filing cabinets and her hourly wage. Graham did not chuckle. He went pale. He knew exactly where I was sitting. He knew I wasn't sorting tax forms. He knew I was sitting on a dossier that could incinerate his reputation. Hearing Brooke dismiss my job as admin work must have felt like watching someone juggle live grenades. He pulled his phone out again, hiding it under the tablecloth. He sent a text to me. "Harper, please, just tell me we are good. I can't do this right now." I saw the text pop up on my screen. I did not reply. Silence is a wonderful amplifier for terror. At the same time, my mother's name appeared on my phone. She must have slipped into the kitchen to text me, likely feeling a twinge of guilt, or perhaps just wanting to ensure I knew what I was missing. "If you had just come, everything would be smooth," she wrote. "Brooke is so happy. Don't make a scene by calling or texting her upset. Let's just have a peaceful day. We can talk about your job situation next week." I read the message and took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea. My job situation. It was fascinating how they worried about my job situation while remaining completely oblivious to the fact that their guest of honor was currently one email away from unemployment. "Let's eat," my father announced, signaling the start of the main event. Everyone shuffled toward the dining table. It was a long table, extended with 2 extra leaves, covered in a white lace tablecloth that had been in the family for 40 years. Brooke made a show of seating Graham next to her, right in the center, the prime position for admiration. "I hope you like ham, Graham," Aunt Linda said, It is the special honey glaze. Graham loves anything high quality, Brooke answered for him. He has such a refined palate. Graham looked like he was chewing on glass. He sat on the edge of his chair, his leg bouncing nervously under the table, shaking the silverware. "Are you okay, honey?" Brooke whispered, loud enough for half the table to hear. "You seem jumpy." "I'm fine," Graham snapped, too quickly. "Just work stuff. A pending merger." "Oh, look at him," Brooke cooed to the table. "Always working. That is dedication." And then the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, intrusive sound that cut through the clinking of porcelain. The family froze. Nobody visited on Easter Sunday without an invitation. "I will get it," my father said, pushing back his chair. He was gone for less than a minute. When he returned, he was holding a large, cream-colored envelope. It was thick and expensive, the kind of stationery used by law firms and luxury estates. "It is a courier delivery," my father said, looking confused. "For Brooke? For me?" Brooke's face lit up. She loved surprises, provided they were public and expensive. She assumed, naturally, that this was a romantic gesture. She looked at Graham, her eyes wide with feigned shock. "Graham, did you do this?" Graham looked at the envelope. He shook his head, genuine confusion on his face. "No, I didn't send anything." Brooke frowned, but her curiosity was stronger than her confusion. "Well, who is it from?" She took the envelope from my father. She held it up so the room could see. There, printed in elegant, stark black font on the front, was a single instruction. "Open when everyone is seated." "How mysterious," Aunt Linda gasped. "It must be a game. Is it a gender reveal?" "No. You aren't pregnant. Is it an engagement thing?" Brooke smiled, enjoying the speculation. She felt like the main character. She assumed it was a gift, perhaps from a wealthy client, or maybe even a delayed gesture from me, a check for $300, perhaps, with a groveling apology note. That would fit her worldview. "Well, we are all seated," Brooke announced playfully. "Let's see what it is." She slid her manicured finger under the seal and tore it open. The sound of ripping paper was the only noise in the room. She reached in and pulled out the contents. It was not a check. It was not a greeting card. It was a high-resolution, full-color preprint of a newspaper article. The header was unmistakable. The Gothic typography of the Wall Street Journal commanded respect even from a distance. Brooke held it up, still smiling, her brain lagging behind her eyes. "It is a newspaper?" she said, sounding disappointed. Then she looked at the headline. "The Cleanup. How one compliance firm saved Kessler Vane from a billion-dollar scandal." And then she saw the subheadline. "Investigator Harper Wynn on the murky world of corporate transparency and the art of the silent fix." And then she saw the photo. It was me, not the Harper she described to her friends, the mousy, disheveled sister in a thrift store sweater. It was Harper the professional. I was standing in my glass-walled office, arms crossed, looking formidable, sharp, and undeniably powerful. The caption read, "Harper Wynn, co-founder of Ridgewell Compliance Group." Brooke stopped breathing. The smile did not just fade from her face, it shattered. She blinked. Once, twice, trying to make the words change. She tried to make the word Ridgewell turn into receptionist. She tried to make the word founder turn into assistant. But the ink was permanent. She looked at the sticky note attached to the corner. "Brooke, since you were worried about my career, I thought I would share tomorrow's headlines. Give Graham my regards. Harper." Her hands began to shake. It started as a subtle tremor in her fingers and quickly escalated until the paper was vibrating audibly. "What is it?" Aunt Linda asked, leaning forward. "Brooke, you look like you're going to faint." Brooke could not speak. Her throat had closed up. Her entire reality, the hierarchy she had built, where she was the queen and I was the peasant, was dissolving in her hands. She looked at Graham. Graham was staring at the paper in her hands. He recognized the layout. He recognized the logo. And then he realized that the package he had been terrified of wasn't a subpoena. It was the public revelation of exactly who his girlfriend's sister actually was. "Brooke?" Graham whispered, his voice cracking. "What does it say?" Brooke tried to shove the paper back into the envelope. She tried to hide it. She wanted to bury it in the backyard and never speak of it again, but her motor skills failed her. Her hands jerked, and the article slipped from her grasp. It fluttered through the air, drifting slowly, almost gracefully, like a feather. It landed face up on the floor, right between Aunt Linda's orthopedic shoes and my father's chair. Aunt Linda, driven by an instinct for gossip that defied the laws of physics, was out of her chair instantly. "Let me help you," she said, swooping down. She picked up the paper. She adjusted her glasses. "The Wall Street Journal?" Linda read aloud, her voice booming in the silence. "Why is Harper's picture in the Wall Street Journal?" The silence that followed was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum before the explosive decompression. Graham closed his eyes. Brooke looked at the wall, wishing she could merge with the wallpaper. And 3 miles away, I poured myself a second cup of tea. The show had officially begun. The silence in the dining room following Aunt Linda's discovery of the article was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, pressurized vacuum that precedes a natural disaster. The air was thick with the smell of cooling ham and the ozone scent of sudden, catastrophic realization. And then, cutting through that thick atmosphere like a serrated knife, the landline rang. It was a jarring, archaic sound. My parents kept the landline for reasons that defied logic, mostly because my father believed cell phones were unreliable in emergencies and because he enjoyed screening calls from telemarketers. The cordless handset sat on the sideboard, right next to the gravy boat. My father, eager to break the suffocating tension caused by the piece of paper trembling in Aunt Linda's hand, reached for the phone as if it were a lifeline. "I will get that," he announced, his voice booming with forced joviality. "Probably Uncle Jerry getting lost on the turnpike. You know how he is with GPS." He picked up the handset, and then, because he is a man who believes his life is a performance that everyone should enjoy, and because he assumes every call is good news, he pressed the speaker button. "Wynn Residence," he shouted, projecting his voice to the back of the room. "You are live with the whole family. Happy Easter." The voice that came back was not Uncle Jerry. It was not a confused relative. It was the sharp, crystal clear, and terrifyingly professional voice of Sarah Reynolds from the Wall Street Journal. "Good morning," Sarah said. Her voice filled the room, bouncing off the china plates. "I am looking for a contact verification for Harper Wynn. I have this number listed as a secondary emergency contact in her personnel file. Is she available?" The room went dead still, forks lowered to plates with soft clinks. Aunt Linda looked from the article in her hand to the phone on the table. "Harper isn't here," my father said, his smile faltering slightly. She is working. Who is this?" "This is Sarah Reynolds from the Wall Street Journal," the voice replied. "I am the lead reporter on the Kessler Vane compliance story. We are going to press with the profile on Ms. Wynn tomorrow, and I just needed to double-check a detail regarding her tenure." Brooke made a sound that was half gasp, half choke. She lunged forward, her chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. "Hang up," Brooke hissed, her eyes wide and manic. "Dad, hang up. It is a prank. It is a spam call." She reached for the phone, her manicured claws extending toward the off button. But my father, confused and protective of his role as the gatekeeper of information, pulled the handset away from her. "Hold on. Brooke," he snapped, his curiosity overriding his daughter's panic. He leaned closer to the speaker. "What story? You are writing a story about Harper?" "Yes, sir," Sarah said, her tone breezy but efficient. "It is the cover feature for the business section. We are profiling the investigation into the pharmaceutical restructuring." "Restructuring?" my father repeated. The word felt heavy and alien in his mouth. To him, Harper was the girl who could barely pay for an oil change. "You mean She is a secretary for the restructuring? There was a pause on the line, a pause that lasted perhaps 2 seconds, but in that dining room, it must have felt like a century. No, sir, Sarah said, and I could hear the slight confusion in her voice. Harper Wynn is the co-founder and senior managing partner of Ridgewell Compliance Group. She is the lead investigator on the case. The words hung in the air, shimmering with undeniable truth. Co-founder, senior managing partner, lead investigator. Graham Kessler dropped his fork. It hit the edge of his plate and clattered onto the floor, but he did not bend down to pick it up. He sat frozen, his face draining of color until he looked like a wax figure melting under the heat of the chandelier. He knew exactly what those titles meant. He knew exactly what Ridgewell did, and he knew, with a sickening certainty, that the woman who held those titles had the power to turn his career into ash. Brooke was shaking her head, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. "That is a lie," she whispered, though no one was listening to her anymore. "She does paperwork. She borrows money for rent. She is a nobody." "I am sorry," my father said into the phone, his voice dropping to a register of seriousness I had never heard him use in my entire life. "You said she runs the company?" "She owns the company, sir," Sarah corrected gently. "She built Ridgewell from the ground up. They are the premier crisis management firm in the tri-state area. Actually, while I have you, can you confirm if she is still at the Jersey City address? We have a camera crew heading over there tonight for the lifestyle segment." "Camera crew?" Aunt Linda breathed out. "For Harper?" "Yes," Sarah continued. "We want to get some shots of her in her home office. The angle is about how she maintains such a low profile while handling billion-dollar portfolios. It is very compelling stuff." My father looked at the phone. Then he looked at Brooke. Then he looked at Graham. "Harper does what?" he asked. It wasn't a question directed at the journalist. It was a question directed at the universe. It was the sound of a man realizing that he had been looking at a lion for 10 years and calling it a house cat. Graham finally moved. He reached for his water glass, his hand trembling so badly that water sloshed over the rim and stained the white tablecloth. "Ridgewell," Graham muttered. It was a curse word. "She is Ridgewell." Sarah Reynolds must have heard the commotion, or perhaps the heavy silence that followed. "I assume she is not there," Sarah said. "I will just reach out to her mobile again. I didn't mean to interrupt your holiday meal. Please, have a wonderful Easter." And then, with a sharp click, the line went dead. The dial tone hummed for a moment before my father slowly pressed the button to end the call. The room was absolutely silent, the kind of silence you find in a library after someone screams, or in a courtroom after the verdict is read. My mother was staring at her hands. Aunt Linda was reading the article again, this time with a voracious intensity, mouthing the words, "co-founder," as if tasting them. But the real show was at the center of the table. Brooke turned her head slowly toward Graham. Her eyes were wide, pleading, desperate for him to laugh, to tell her it was a mix-up, to tell her that her sister was still the loser she needed her to be. "Graham?" she whispered. "Why did you say that name? Why did you say Ridgewell?" Graham did not look at her. He could not look at her. He was staring at the empty spot where his future used to be. He realized now why I hadn't come to dinner. He realized why I hadn't replied to his texts. He realized that while Brooke was playing house, I was playing God with his stock options. "Graham," Brooke said, her voice rising to a shriek, "look at me. Tell them she is lying." Graham closed his eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath. "She isn't lying," he said. His voice was flat, dead. "Ridgewell is the auditor. They are the ones investigating my unit. They are the ones who have the evidence." He opened his eyes and looked at the phone where Sarah's voice had just come from. "Harper isn't an admin, Brooke," he said, and for the first time, there was venom in his voice directed at her. "Your sister is the one holding the gun to my head." My father sat down heavily in his chair. He looked at the ham, which was now cold. He looked at the expensive wine Brooke had bought to show off. He looked at his family, which had just been rearranged by a single phone call. "She owns the company," my father whispered to himself. My daughter owns the company. Brooke looked around the table. She saw the shift. She saw Aunt Linda looking at the article with respect. She saw her parents looking confused and awestruck. She saw Graham looking defeated. The spotlight had moved. It was no longer shining on Brooke and her perfect boyfriend. It was shining on the empty chair at the end of the table, the chair I had refused to sit in. And for the first time in her life, Brooke Wynne realized that she was not the protagonist of this story. She was just the collateral damage. The silence in the dining room was not just quiet. It was brittle. It was the kind of silence that happens when a bomb has been defused, but everyone is still waiting for the tick. My father was staring at the landline as if it were a coiled snake. Brooke was staring at the floor where the article lay like a fallen flag. Graham was staring at nothing. His eyes glazed over with the realization that his entire career was currently being held together by the goodwill of a woman he had never bothered to speak to. Then, my father's cell phone buzzed. It was sitting on the table next to the bread basket, a video call request. He looked at the screen. "It is the journalist again," he said, his voice hollow. "She is asking for a video confirmation. She says they are rolling cameras for the lifestyle segment and want to say hello to the family." My father, moving like a man in a trance, swiped the green button. He propped the phone up against the crystal water pitcher so the camera faced the table. And there I was. I was not physically in the room, but my presence filled it instantly. On the small screen, I was sitting in my home office. The lighting was professional, soft but clear, highlighting the stark, modern lines of the room behind me. I was wearing a white silk blouse, simple and severe. There was no clutter, no noise, just the clean, expensive quiet of a life that did not need to scream for attention. Sarah Reynolds leaned into the frame next to me, smiling with the bright, predatory energy of a journalist who knows she has gold. "Hi, everyone," Sarah chirped. "We just wanted to do a quick mic check, and Harper suggested we wave to the family. We are just setting up for the segment on the architecture of truth. Say hello, Harper." I looked directly into the camera lens. I knew that on their end, I was staring right into their souls. "Hello," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and lower than they were used to. It was my boardroom voice. "Happy Easter." Brooke let out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a laugh. She pushed her chair back and leaned toward the phone, her face filling with a desperate, frantic attempt at damage control. "Harper!" she cried out, her voice pitching up 2 octaves into a fake, sugary sweetness. "Oh my God, you look amazing. We were just talking about you. Why didn't you tell us? We had no idea you were, well, that you were doing so well. You should have come. We miss you so much." I watched her face contort into that smile. It was the same smile she used when she wanted to return a dress she had already worn. It was a transaction, not an emotion. "I didn't come, Brooke," I said, my voice cutting through her babble without raising a decibel. "Because you explicitly told me not to. You sent me a text on Wednesday telling me that my job was embarrassing and that I would lower the tone of the event." Brooke flinched as if I had reached through the screen and slapped her. The smile vanished. I didn't mean it like that," she stammered, looking around the table for support that wasn't there. "I was just stressed. You know how I get. I just wanted everything to be perfect for Graham. I didn't know you were this. You didn't know I was successful," I corrected her. "And therefore, I wasn't welcome." My mother chimed in then, her voice trembling. "Harper, honey, that is not fair. We always want you here. We worry about you. We thought you were struggling. We were trying to protect you from feeling inadequate next to everyone else." I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I looked at the aunts and uncles who had spent the last decade asking me when I was going to settle down or find a real path. "That is the problem, Mom," I said gently. "You assumed I was inadequate because you never actually looked at me. You only looked at your expectations of me." I leaned forward slightly, resting my chin on my hand. "In the last 10 years," I asked, Has anyone at that table ever asked me a single follow-up question about my work? Has anyone ever asked, what does a compliance officer actually do, or what kind of cases do you handle? The table was silent. Aunt Linda looked down at her lap. My father rubbed the back of his neck. You asked me if I had health insurance. I continued. You asked me if I could afford rent. You asked me if I was dating anyone. You asked questions designed to confirm your fear that I was failing. You never asked a question designed to understand who I was. We didn't understand the industry, my father mumbled. You didn't try, I said. And that is fine. I accepted that a long time ago. But you don't get to rewrite history now just because you found out I have a net worth that intimidates you. You don't get to be proud of the outcome when you were ashamed of the process. I shifted my gaze on the screen. I wasn't looking at my parents anymore. I was looking at the man sitting next to Brooke. Hello, Graham, I said. Graham Kessler looked like a man facing a firing squad. He was pale, sweating, and he looked small. He cleared his throat, but no sound came out. He tried again. Hello? Harper? He managed to choke out. Ms. Wynne? You don't need to call me Ms. Wynne at the dinner table, I said. But we do need to be clear about something. Brooke looked between us, sensing the shift in gravity. What is going on? Graham knows, I said. Don't you, Graham? He nodded, a jerky, terrified motion. The deal we discussed on Wednesday stands, I told him. The timeline is locked. The filing goes in tomorrow morning. But I want to be very clear about one thing. Graham, the fact that you are eating ham with my parents right now changes absolutely nothing. I paused to let that sink in. I will not bury the data for you, I said. I will not soften the language in the report, because you are dating my sister. Ridgewell operates on transparency. If you want to save your company, you follow the protocol I gave you. If you try to use this family connection to ask for a favor, the deal is off, and I release the unredacted files. Graham swallowed hard. I understand, he whispered. I respect that. Complete transparency. Good, I said. Brooke looked at Graham, horrified. What files? Graham, what is she talking about? Is she threatening you? She is saving me, Graham snapped at her, his voice sharp with the stress he had been hiding all day. She is the only reason I still have a job on Monday. Brooke, so please, for the love of God, stop talking. Brooke recoiled. Her jaw dropped. Her perfect boyfriend, her trophy, had just snapped at her in front of the entire family to defend the sister she had called a loser. I checked the time on my watch. I have to go, I said. Sarah needs to start filming. We have a lot of ground to cover. Harper, wait, my mother said, tears actually welling up in her eyes now. When will we see you? Can we come visit? I would love to see your office. Maybe, I said, but not today. Today, I am going to finish my work, and you are going to finish your dinner. I reached for the button to end the call, but I stopped for one last comment. Oh, and Brooke, I said. She looked at the screen, her eyes red, her makeup starting to smudge. The article coming out tomorrow, I said. It isn't about how much money I make. I specifically asked Sarah not to focus on the financials. The article is about the importance of seeing things as they really are. It is about how people hide rot behind shiny facades, and how eventually, the truth always audits the books. I smiled, a small, genuine smile. I think you will find it very educational. Enjoy the grill. I heard it cost $300. I tapped the screen. The connection severed. I was back in my silent room. Sarah Reynolds was looking at me with a mixture of awe and professional curiosity. That was cold, she said. Impressive, but cold. It wasn't cold, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. It was just the first honest conversation we have had in 20 years. I walked over to the window. I could imagine the scene I had just left behind. The shouting, the blaming, the frantic questions. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't the vessel for their disappointment. I was free. Ready to film? Sarah asked. I am ready, I said. But the story wasn't quite over. I knew my sister. I knew that when a narcissist is cornered, they don't surrender. They look for a scapegoat, and I knew exactly who Brooke was about to turn on. The trap I had set for Graham wasn't just about the company, it was about forcing a choice, and that choice was about to happen right now, over a plate of cold ham. The video call ended, leaving my apartment in silence, but I knew the noise in my parents' dining room was just reaching its crescendo. I had not dropped a bomb to destroy them. I had simply turned on the lights in a room they had preferred to keep dark for a decade. But there was one final piece of business to attend to. It was the loose end that tied everything together. The twist that my sister never saw coming because she was too busy looking in the mirror. I sat down at my desk and opened the final email draft I had prepared for Graham. The subject line was stark. Condition of settlement, personnel adjustment. Earlier in the week, when I reviewed the internal communications of the strategy unit at Kessler Vane, I had found a series of emails that flagged a major compliance violation. They were instructions on how to massage the toxicity data to make it look more palatable for the investors. The language was flowery. It used words like narrative shaping and optical alignment. It was the kind of corporate speak used to hide ugly truths. The person who wrote those emails was not a full-time employee of Kessler Vane. It was an external consultant hired on a freelance retainer to help Graham polish his team's image. That consultant was Brooke Wynn. My sister had not just been dating Graham, she had been working for him. She had been using her background in branding to help him lie to regulators. She had signed her name to the document that authorized the suppression of the medical data. She thought she was being a power couple. She thought she was helping her boyfriend succeed. In reality, she had made herself the primary liability in a federal investigation. I hit send. 3 miles away, Graham's phone buzzed. I can picture the scene with absolute clarity. Graham would be looking at the email. He would see the attachment, a PDF containing Brooke's invoices and her signed approval of the fraudulent press release, and then he would see my demand. To avoid a full DOJ audit, the author of the fraudulent internal memo must be terminated immediately and publicly disavowed by the company. Graham looked at Brooke. She was likely still spiraling, trying to explain to Aunt Linda that my company was probably small, or a scam, or that I was lying. It doesn't matter, Brooke was probably shouting. So what if she has a company? I am the one who helped you with the strategy. Graham, I am the one who wrote the plan. That is the problem, Graham said. His voice was no longer fearful. It was resigned. He was a man who had been given a choice between his life and his girlfriend, and for a man like Graham, that is not a choice at all. Brooke, Graham said, cutting her off. I just got the final term sheet from Harper, from Ridgewell. Tell her to go to hell, Brooke spat. We don't need her. I do need her, Graham said, because if I don't give her what she wants, I go to prison. The room went quiet again. My father looked up from his hands. What does she want? My father asked. Graham held up his phone. He looked at Brooke with dead eyes. She demands accountability. She has proof that the data manipulation was a communications strategy error, and since you are the communications consultant who proposed that strategy, Brooke, she is demanding your contract be terminated. Brooke laughed. It was a high, nervous sound. You can't fire me. I am your girlfriend. I am doing this for us. It is not a request, Graham said, his voice hardening. It is a condition of the settlement. If I keep you on the payroll, if I keep your strategy, the company sinks. I have to choose. Brooke, the company or you? Brooke stared at him. She waited for the gallantry. She waited for him to say that he would burn it all down to protect her honor. She waited for the movie moment she had scripted in her head. I am accepting the terms, Graham said. What? Brooke whispered. I am firing you. Brooke, Graham said, loud enough for the cousins in the living room to hear. Effective immediately. I am sending the email to HR right now. We are disavowing the strategy you wrote. It is over. Brooke stood up, her chair crashing backward. You are choosing a compliance audit over me? After everything I did to make you look good? You didn't make me look good, Graham shouted. finally losing his composure. "You made me commit fraud, and you treated your sister like trash because you were insecure. And now that trash is the only person who can save me from a federal indictment. So yes, Brooke, I am choosing Harper. I am choosing the person who actually knows what they are doing." Brooke looked around the room. She looked for an ally. She looked at our parents. "Mom! Dad!" she screamed. "Do something! Harper is ruining my life. She is making him fire me. She is jealous because I am happy." My mother looked torn, her instinct to coddle Brooke warring with the undeniable reality of the situation. But it was my father who stood up. My father, who had spent 30 years worrying about pennies, who had spent 10 years asking me when I would get a real job, walked over to Brooke. "Sit down," he said. "Dad, tell him," Brooke pleaded. "Tell him Harper is evil." "Harper isn't here," my father said, his voice shaking with a new kind of anger, an anger directed inward. "Harper is at home, working. She is cleaning up a mess that you helped create." "I was just trying to help," Brooke sobbed. "No," my father said. "You were trying to look important. There is a difference." He looked at Graham. "You should go. Son, if you need to fire my daughter to save your company, that is your business. But this dinner is over." Then he looked at Brooke. "And you? You stop talking about your sister. You stop calling her embarrassing. Because the only person who should be embarrassed at this table is me. I let you treat her like that. I let you make us believe she was nothing, just because she didn't brag like you do." "I was the successful one," Brooke wailed, clinging to her identity like a life raft. "No," my father said. "You were just the loud one." It was the first time in my life my father had defended me without qualifying it. He didn't say, "Harper tries hard." He simply stated the truth. He stripped away the noise and left only the fact. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was Brooke. I answered. I owed her that much. "How could you?" she whispered. She sounded broken. "Graham broke up with me. He said he couldn't be with someone who was a compliance risk. He kicked me out of the house." "He made a business decision," I said calmly. "You understand business, don't you, Brooke?" "You ruined everything," she cried. "Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you tell me you were rich? Why didn't you tell me you owned Ridgewell? If I had known, I would have treated you differently." "I know," I said, "and that is exactly why I didn't tell you." There was a silence on the line. She was breathing raggedly. "Can you fix it?" she asked, her voice turning into a beg. "Can't you tell Graham it was a mistake? Can't you tell him to take me back? Use your leverage. Harper, please, I will do anything. I will tell everyone you are amazing. Just get me back in." "No," I said. "Why?" she screamed. "You have the power." "Because you need to learn the difference between value and volume," I said. "I am not going to use my professional credibility to clean up your personal mess. Transparency. Brooke, that is the new rule. You have to live in the truth now." "I hate you," she said. "I know," I replied. "But for the first time, I don't care, because I respect myself too much to need you to like me." I hung up the phone. The next morning, Monday, the Wall Street Journal article went live at 8 o'clock. The headline was exactly what Sarah had promised. "The Quiet Fixer: How Harper Wynn Built an Empire on Truth." But there was a paragraph in the middle that I hadn't expected. A little gift from Sarah. The article detailed the misguided communications strategy that had almost sunk Kessler Vane. It didn't name Brooke directly, but it described her role perfectly. It described a culture of superficial branding over substantive safety. In the small, incestuous world of corporate PR where Brooke worked, everyone knew who the consultant for Graham was. By noon, Brooke's phone had stopped ringing. Her reputation as a fixer was dead. She was now known as the person who prioritized spin over legality. She had lost her boyfriend, her job, and her standing, all because she tried to bury the one person who could see through her. I walked into my office at Ridgewell that morning. The staff was buzzing about the article. Elias gave me a nod as I passed his glass wall. I sat down at my desk. I looked at the view of the Hudson River. My mother called me at 10. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it later. "Harper," she said, her voice sounding older, humbler. "We read the article. We didn't know. We are so proud of you, not because of the money, but because you did the right thing. Dad wants to know if you would like to come over for dinner next Sunday. Just us. No Brooke. We want to ask you about your work." I saved the message. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need them to put me on a pedestal. I just needed them to stop standing on my shoulders to make themselves feel taller. And finally, after 34 years, they had stepped down. I opened my laptop. I had a new case file waiting. A tech company in Silicon Valley was hiding losses. It was time to go back to work. My name is Harper Wynn. I don't post my life on social media. I don't brag at dinner parties. I don't need to be the loudest person in the room, because in the end, the truth is the quietest thing there is, but it is the only thing that echoes forever. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below with your location, and let's share our thoughts on Harper's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so more people can hear this story.